Our next panel is Navigating the AI Frontier: Justice, Fairness, and Generative AI in Our Courts. Please welcome our speakers to the stage.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We weren't quite sure what the crowd was going to look like after a nice long lunch, so it's good to see you all back with us again. I am Mike Abbott with the Thomson Reuters Institute. I am really looking forward to this discussion today. You know, the panel, we've got 4 incredible panelists joining us today, and in just a second we'll have them introduce themselves. But we had a couple of conversations leading into today, and the first one, we had a number of topics that we thought were potential discussion points for us, but pretty quickly, to a person, everybody said, look, there's nothing more important than trust in the judicial system. And this is where we should focus this, especially since this is actually the trust conference. So looking forward to the discussion. We have a very limited amount of time today and a lot of things to discuss, so I'm just going to turn it over in order here for everybody to make an introduction to themselves. Mike.
Great. Thanks, Mike, and thanks to the Thomson Reuters Foundation. My name is Mike Buenger. I recently stepped down as the Executive Vice President at the National Center for State Courts. And if you're wondering why somebody from the U.S. state court community is on this panel, one of the reasons is that 97% of the cases that are handled in the United States are handled by the state court system. The other reason is we spent the last 18 months in a partnership with the Thomson Reuters Institute on the whole area of how AI and the policy frameworks that need to be built around it should be considered by court leaders in the United States and now, fortunately, by court leaders around the world. So thank you.
My name's James Dingemans. I'm a Court of Appeal judge in England and Wales, so I sit in cases on civil and criminal, but I'm also Senior President of Tribunals, and that means a responsibility for 5,000 tribunal judges with 15 separate chamber presidents dealing with issues from tax all the way through to property and immigration and asylum and employment.
My name is Tony O'Connor. I'm a judge of the High Court in Dublin, which is a court of first instance, but deals with everything from EU law to constitutional law to, which I'm doing just finished a clinical negligence case, and next week I'll be doing a jury action involving defamation and assault type of actions. I'm a director of the Irish Court Service Board, and in that context, for this forum, I might just say that there's the strategy for the Court Service Board from 2024 to 2027, and it's quite ambitious, but we're moving from completely eradicating paper, digital platforms. We're going to have invested millions in a unified case management system and improved data governance so that we now know and can possibly predict what's coming up in about 6 months' time. We also, one of the big issues is cyber security. The health service was attacked last year, and we're investing hugely in that. And then there's the issue about the culture, new generation and generation like myself on the way out, trying to bridge that gap. I think I'm quite excited by some of the presentations to the board by the senior management team on the proof of concepts, which involve AI as well. 2 years ago, I asked the question, was AI going to be used? And I was given a positive answer, no way. But because of the national strategy in Ireland that AI is there, we have to adopt it. But the principal issue is human oversight and accountability. I think I've done enough now for my introduction. Thanks.
Hi, folks. I'm Katherine Forrest, and I'm a former United States District Judge for the Southern District of New York. And I currently am chair of the artificial intelligence practice in a private law firm in New York City called Weiss. And I've been dealing with artificial intelligence now for a number of years and have written in the criminal justice area on machine learning and bias issues in the criminal justice area, as well as a recent book that's forthcoming on superintelligence. And I am vice chair of the New Jersey State Court Systems Committee on Artificial Intelligence. And also, believe it or not, they've constituted a committee on sentience in New York City, and so I'm also dealing with legal personhood and sentience issues in New York City with the bar committees.
Thanks very much. Katherine, I'm going to stay with you, actually. As I mentioned at the onset, you all said that trust was absolutely the topic that we should be focused on today, but I would like to get a response from each of you, actually. Why is trust so important in the legal system? And you could argue as important or more important than anywhere else. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me sort of start by saying that we're here really talking in large part about the judicial system and about courts, and trust is absolutely critical to a sense of belief in our social contract. You know, the social contract is made up of all of us together, coming together and setting the rules of engagement with each other. And those rules of engagement are then set forth in the legal structures that we use to govern our society. And you've got to have consistency, and you've got to have predictability. And so as we think about trust and artificial intelligence and the movement of artificial intelligence into the court system, we've got to find a way to be able to transmit that same kind of consistency, predictability, and hopefully a reduction in biases. We already have some human biases. As we know, judges are humans. Yes, it's true. And you come to the table with whoever you are, but what we want to do is to try to find a way to make artificial intelligence as unbiased as possible to the extent that it's going to be utilized in the justice system. So it's very important in terms of being able to maintain a sense of trust in our social contract and therefore in justice itself.
Tony?
Yeah, Mike warned me about this question, or gave me this, and I thought about it on my way over and yesterday as well. And why is trust so important in the judiciary? And I just thought about it when I was coming to London, that the modern state in Ireland is born out of revolution. And that came about, I'm going to give you a short little history lesson, that in the middle of the 19th century, there was the land question in Ireland. There was also Catholic emancipation. So that all built up. Then we had the First World War, and we had a rising, which nobody supported. But then you gather momentum, and I bring you then to the 1920s, when there were actually 4 or 5, at one stage there were 5 different court systems working in Ireland. And the citizens do need to trust in their courts. So the new state of Ireland had to actually bring that all together. And revolution, with revolution, with change, AI is bringing that change. The courts are going to have to adapt to it. And why is trust so important? As an arm of government, we have to maintain that trust with the citizens, because otherwise, without that trust, we're nothing.
Yeah, James.
Well, we didn't have a revolution in the 20th century, but we did have the Glorious Revolution in 1688. And since then, there have been blips on the way with our courts. But by and large, in modern United Kingdom, the courts are well respected. But that's something that's built up over centuries and can be lost in minutes if people think that machines are taking the decisions, which is why there are a number of guiding principles which it seems to me that we have to ensure are kept to keep everyone happy with artificial intelligence in the system. So transparency being the first, data protection, and the human in the loop. The person who is making the decision is the person who has made the decision. And trust can be easily lost and takes some time to gain.
Mm-hmm. When I think about the issue of trust in the judiciary, and I want to pick up on something that Katherine had mentioned, that is the notion of the social contract that we all share with each other. I go back to an academic in the United States, Martin Shapiro, who said that spanning time and space across every culture, disputes that people cannot solve themselves or resolve themselves are generally handled in a triad. You've got the complainant, you've got the counter-complainant, and it's submitted to a third party for resolution of the dispute. This is where we can't figure it out ourselves. I think for a judicial system to really operate well, people have to have confidence that that third party that this dispute is submitted to is competent, is objective, is able to ascertain fact from fiction, is able to bring the best tools to bear in order to bring a solution to the problem. And I was sitting in the back of the room while many of you were in breakout sessions, and the crews came in and they started removing the back 2 rows of chairs, and I thought, oh, this is not a good sign. But it made me remember an analogy that somebody gave me one time. Courts are like operating rooms. You don't think about them till you need them. When you do need them, you generally don't want to be there because you assume something bad is going to happen. And finally, you hope that the people who are in there are competent and capable of resolving the issue that you're bringing into it. And one of the things that courts do is they bring finality. They bring decisional finality to our disputes. And when those systems don't exist, when they don't have the capacity to bring some kind of decisional finality that people trust in, not just the parties to a case, but society at large trusts in, the consequence is, as we've seen repeatedly throughout human history, people do seek justice, but they often seek justice in ways that are quite counterproductive to a society and to individuals. So maintaining trust in the system is absolutely critical, not simply to the parties, but to the society, the social stability at a larger level.
Thanks, Mike. Before we move off this topic of trust, we do have a question from the group that's come in, and it's kind of in line with what we've been discussing. How do we implement unbiased AI in the justice system when existing institutions, law enforcement, sentencing, et cetera, are not themselves free from bias yet? I'll open this up to whoever wants to jump in here.
Well, I can sort of jump in, and I would say that this is an incredibly complicated question because what we've talked about in that question are different pieces of what leads us into the court system, right? You've got the policing, you've got investigation, you've got the prosecutors, and then you've got, of course, the court system, and you also have the juries if it's going to be a criminal case. And so each one of those pieces has its own separate role to play. And so I don't think that you can take it as a monolith, that they're all of the same tools are going to be utilized in all of the same ways. And certainly in terms of the AI tools, they're really quite different. So let's take the court system right now, and in terms of the state court system, and this was a book that I had done on all of the different kinds of software that are used in all 50 states that are really machine learning tools more than generative AI that do scoring for individuals for recidivism and for propensity for violence and for potential sentencing or for programs that might be offered to them in terms of rehabilitation. And one of the big issues is that the data, as you all know with AI, the data that you get out is only as good as the data that goes in. And if you've got social inequalities that are going in based upon hundreds of years in the United States, of social inequality, and that's in the data, that's what you're going to get out of the data. You're not going to get some magic world out of the data, right, that didn't exist for those hundreds of years. So there are a number of people who are working on corrections for this, and it's quite complicated in terms of how to adjust the algorithms. With generative AI and some of the ways in which the neural networks work and the contextual learning and this, that, and the other thing, there's some benefit to and movement in that direction. But synthetic data is the one thing that I would say to you is actually making some inroads now. It used to be considered that synthetic data, and I'll end very shortly, it used to be considered that synthetic data was going to create a lot of noise, and it was going to create a lot of additional problems, and that synthetic data was a negative. Now, these days, you can get sort of idealized data in some ways, and synthetic data can be a positive. The problem is deciding on what the norms are that you believe are appropriate to put into that data. And I can venture to say that not all of us would agree what is a serious crime, how seriously a particular crime should be treated, or something of that nature. So I would say ultimately to the question, it's very complicated to get unbiased tools, but I also would say we humans come to the table biased as well. And so we're going to have to do the best we can, I think, to try to reconcile all of the above.
I would say the only true answer to that is because you're never going to have judges that can actually get down and understand what data is input into it, is to have that dreadful expression that I know anyone AI hates, which is the human in the loop, which in this case is the judge, and ensure that the judge who makes the decision is responsible for the decision.
I thought David McCrawley yesterday made an interesting point. He said, courts are not social media companies. They are places where things like fact and truth and fair application of the law are taken quite seriously. Judges don't do their jobs if they're not trying to ascertain the truth of a case. They're not trying to ensure that the facts are accurate. If they're not making sure that they're applying the law as fairly and as objectively as they can. And I think as these AI tools, and they are, they're becoming more and more ubiquitous within court systems, part of it driven by need. A friend of mine says that their public defender system in the state is overwhelmed by the amount of data that the police cameras are generating now. They can't actually get through it to help deal with the defense because it is so overwhelming. So these tools are coming in, they are becoming more ubiquitous. And I do agree with James that part of the safeguard is the tradition of the judiciary, which is to take time to figure it out, which I might also add is becoming a complicating factor as the public expects more and more that going to court is like buying something off of Amazon.
I might just say, my Tuppence everything's worth, that I understand the question to say, well, why couldn't AI do what I do? If it's been too simplistic about it. And I would say that, say, a jury, if you take a jury, for example, they're bringing their life experiences. And one thing that AI doesn't do is bring life experiences and the emotional side of things. Yeah. And society needs to reflect that as human beings.
Mike, you touched on something that leads me into the next thing I wanted to ask you all about, and that is we are very much a culture now of instant gratification. You've got answers at your fingertips all of the time. AI is only accelerating that. That doesn't always align well with an institution or a system that is perceived as being too slow, too complex. You're not getting the answers or the results or the resolution that you're looking for right away. How do we educate people on the risks and dangers of an over-reliance on AI, for one, but while also try to maintaining the kind of the foundation of the legal system, and that is the decisional framework and those traditions that for a system that truly does work? How do you do that? How do you educate without coming across as you're out of touch with this, you're defensive, you're the person in the neighborhood that says, get off my lawn type of thing? Like, how do we resolve that? Catherine, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Oh, starting with me.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think it's a very it's a hard question because we don't expect instant gratification from the judicial system, right? We expect that things will take time, and that if we end up in a situation where we have tools that can very quickly resolve different kinds of disputes with different kinds of AI technologies, that will give us a kind of instant gratification that we're not used to right now in the judicial system. Estonia right now is trying a set of tools that do some small claims disputes. China has some internet courts that are actually using blockchain as evidence, and so we have examples where it's occurring. I, by the way, am always in favor of a human in the loop for the ultimate decision making. But one thing that I would say is that we are going to have a difficulty with, once we have tools rolled out, having an overdependence, not necessarily of judges, but also of their support staff on the utilization of tools that are able to get them very quickly to an answer. And one of the things that we are going to have as a next generation problem, which we thought was hallucinations, it's not going to be hallucinations at all, since the rate of hallucinations has dropped so precipitously depending upon the tool. It's going to be the inability to understand the logic and the analysis. And that, I think, which will happen very, very quickly and will allow decisions to be rendered quickly, can not only result in an overdependence on a quick resolution, but also an ignorance or a lack of ability to understand the logic.
If I could follow up on what Katherine said, I think it's a very difficult thing for the courts to deal with, one of which is we're not very good at explaining what it is we do to the public generally. We've done a lot of polling in the United States where people who actually encounter the court system have a much higher favorability rating than people who never encounter the court system. And I think part of the challenge that courts have to begin to deal with isn't simply a question of process and whether we can speed things up and how we do better case management, but it's also engaging with the public so that we understand the needs of the public, but the public also understands that there is value in deliberation. There is value in thoughtful consideration. And what you can resolve in a dispute with Amazon is 30 seconds is not what you want when it comes to who gets child custody in the case. I think court leaders need to be more engaged in explaining that, but I think also the public, as it becomes more and more used to instant answering, we heard today from Matthew Price about we're not worried about search anymore, we're worried about answer. As we get used to instant answering, all of us have to be a little cautious about what that means when it comes to the adjudication of rights. You would not want your surgeon to go on the internet and pull up ChatGPT and say, please explain to me how to take out an appendix, right? Well, deciding who gets the kids, deciding whether you go to prison, deciding what company wins the multi-billion-dollar lawsuit is like the surgeon. It's really tough, difficult, hard questions, and it takes a lot of thought and deliberation that I think we're becoming increasingly intolerant of.
Yeah. Mike, can I stick with you here for a second because of your work with the AI Policy Consortium with the National Center of State Courts? This is a question that came in from the group here. How do you ensure judges get the adequate training on the latest technological developments and how they could possibly be misused in crimes?
Actually, that's one of the big parts of the TRI and CSC project, which is the education of the judiciary. I'm not so sure that we expect judges to be software engineers or that we can educate judges to be software engineers. I think where we need to educate judges is to understand what the soft points are, where the problems arise, how you anticipate. Here's an example. How are courts going to deal with artificially created evidence? Either where it's acknowledged or more troubling where it's not acknowledged, where people come in and say, here's the video of what happened. No, here's the video of what happened, because of course the tools to edit video are becoming incredibly sophisticated. And you have a judge who then has to make the call, which one is the right portrayal, what is the fact of what happened in this particular dispute. And so a lot of the effort that we've been doing with the Thomson Reuters Institute is on this notion of educating judges. What is AI? How does it work? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? What do you need to be aware of? What do you need to be cautious and skeptical of? And we've educated, I think, since the initiative started, almost 20,000 people across the globe. So that's one of the areas that I think the judiciaries need to focus on a lot.
Now, James.
Well, I mean, different judges have obviously different levels of experience of technology, but all judges have in England and Wales to go through the Judicial College and their training there. We also produce published guidance for judicial officers about AI and its uses, and all of the overarching principles of transparency and data security, so that everyone with good fortune is on the same page in relation to the risks, but also the benefits that can be brought from AI.
Likewise, in Ireland, we're maybe playing catch up, but there's a great awareness of it. But going back to the original question, what role do the courts have in educating people about why there's a delay in the process? This is my own personal view. I do trust in the public. If they want an instant answer, they can go off to ChatGPT. I viewed an Australian program sponsored by the Australian government for resolution of family law disputes. So you can go in if you want to break up with your partner, you can put in all the details and you can get a prediction of what's going to happen. But from the court's perspective, the few family law cases that I've actually done, so often people just want to tell their story, and that's it's not just about the result.
Mike, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is one of the things I think that's really important about the potential for an AI tool is not only to make decisions, but to assist with case management. And case management is one of the primary sort of gating factors for judges and for their clerks and for the staff in the courthouse all over the place, right? And so we have in the United States, in the state court system, as well as in the federal system, a delay in trials where people's liberty has been impacted. For instance, in the state court system or in the federal system where someone's incarcerated pre-trial. And so you might have a situation where that individual and their counsel are waiting for quite a time before they can actually get to a trial. One of the positive aspects of these AI tools that are being developed right now is the ability to assist with case management. And sort of justice delayed is also justice denied. So it's not just about making determinations that, of course, is within the discretion of the human being ultimately, because it's humans on humans judging each other's breaking of the social contract, to go back to my first answer. But it's also being able to smooth out the process so we can get people to the point of the trial, of the jury trial, and to justice, whatever that may be, in a timely fashion.
Yeah. So we've talked about the role of the courts as it relates to education. I want to stay on that topic, but we've also been talking about the pace of change and how quickly things are progressing. One of the things that each one of you mentioned in our calls leading up to this, was that the ethics of AI and the guardrails that are either in place or will be in place can't possibly keep pace with the speed of change that we're seeing, right? I'm going to borrow a line from Mike here. He said, what happens when it's the dog finally catches the car syndrome, right? Okay, we've adopted all of these tools. It's starting to change the way that we work. They're being deployed throughout our organizations, but we may not be ethically or operationally ready for what all that brings. So I guess my question to you is, what role either do the courts or should the courts play in regulations, the licensing of tools that are developed, how they're implemented, and how they're used throughout the organization?
I think the courts have to be in control. The judges must decide what can be safely adopted. For myself, I entirely agree with Katherine that the principled use at the moment of AI is in data population of case fields, where a lot of delays take place in someone having to go through and authenticate a bundle that has been uploaded and ensure that that's dealt with. That seems to me a very principled use, but it is only because the judges have allowed that to happen. Of course, judges tend to be slower on the uptake, but as I say, different judges have different speeds of doing that, and we've got excellent support staff that provide that. But the real protection is that it comes down to the judges who are responsible for the system.
I think AI creates an interesting dilemma, because if we go out, say it's 2035, and there are in fact sophisticated tools. Everyone in here comes from a country that has an access to justice problem. Different scales, but there's an access to justice problem. People can't get access to legal counsel. People can't get access to the courts. And so let's say it's 2035 and sophisticated tools have been developed that allow people to seek AI-based legal advice. Right? So I'm going to represent myself. I'm going to use a tool that gives me legal advice. Well, if a lawyer screws up in representing a client, there's an entire disciplinary system that kicks in. There's all sorts of sanctions that can be applied. There's opportunity for litigation for malpractice. What happens if the tool screws up? What happens if I'm over-reliant or I'm dependent upon these sophisticated tools and they in fact give me bad advice and I lose my case? Where do I go to redress that problem? And so I think the tools really are kind of pushing the envelope of thinking and anticipation about what is the role of the court in ensuring public protection first and foremost. The whole notion in the United States of courts licensing lawyers to practice law is first and foremost the idea of public protection, that you don't have incompetent legal counsel representing you. And I think these tools may begin to force courts in the United States and courts around the world to really consider what's acceptable in terms of public perception and public protection and what's not anymore.
My own view is that I ran this question with the head of IT in court service, and he came back and he said, well, what's to stop people from gaming the system? And I've been thinking about that, and I talked to one of the participants in this at lunchtime, and maybe I'm getting paranoid, but I'm not sure what the courts can do about, say, this scenario where you actually gain priority. If James issues a judgment and he wants to influence the rest of the common law world in relation to some aspect, and you code it in such a way that the AI systems pick it up before anybody else, I wouldn't know how to do it, but I asked actually one of the AI people, one of the AI tools, to tell me how would I do it, and it came out with all this, what I thought was gibberish, but I'm going to run it by my son and see whether he can make head or tail out of it. But if I thought about it, there are other people who are thinking about it. So I think there is a scenario of the dog chasing the car and never catching the car.
And let me just sort of throw in and take it from a slightly different angle, which is how are we going to deal, does the court have a role in dealing with the tools that are going to be populating our society at large? And do we have a regulatory role? The answer is no. We don't have a regulatory role. The court's own tools are the court's own tools, and of course the courts can control that. But in terms of what's going to be happening in our society writ large, and how are we going to maintain sort of the ethical boundaries of our human values, whatever they may be, because they're going to differ widely across the various cultures and people within this room even. But how do we do that? That's not for the court, in a way. That's going to be for a very, very significant problem of alignment and misalignment, and whether or not, once we hit a point of AGI and superintelligence, we'll have any hope of having reinforcement learning with human feedback when these things can self-replicate and be able to do all kinds of things themselves. We'll never be able to keep up. So we've got a lot of work to do, and a lot of it is within the hands of the engineers.
Yeah, for sure. We've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to end this on a kind of a positive note. It's ridiculous to ask you these days. You can't look down the road 3 months in terms of how fast things are developing and changing, let alone 3 years, but I'm still going to ask it. If you're thinking about, put your 3-year vision on here, what is the one thing that gives you the most encouragement, enthusiasm, make you the most optimistic about what AI is going to bring to the legal system? Mike, I'll just start with you and we'll go down the line.
If you have a chance, and you can go on the web of the Arizona Supreme Court, they have initiated a fascinating project where they found that, a lot of you are in the media, in the press, and when I was a young lawyer working in the courts in Ohio, we had courthouse news reporters. That's all they did. They just hung around the courthouse all day. That's gone. And what the Arizona Supreme Court found is that a lot of the reporting on their opinions was not entirely accurate, because people don't have the years of experience. So they've created an internet or an AI avatar that they now use. They write a script about what the court decided in plain language, which is unusual for lawyers, in plain language that explains to the press and to the public what the court decided, why they decided it, and what the outcome should be. I think those are just immediate, not necessarily 3 years out, but I think those are immediate examples of how AI can really enhance the operations of the judiciary.
For me, the thing that most excites me is accessibility. We have excellent solicitors and barristers and legal executives in England and Wales, but they can't provide advice to everyone, and their advice is expensive. But the programs that are now being developed that will be able to give some reliable advice as long as they are supervised and the machine learns from itself, I think that is something that will be fantastic, so that people can come to court even if they're acting in person and have at least the beginnings of an idea of what the law is about.
Tony and
Very briefly,
Catherine, we're at time.
I know we're out of time.
Yeah, that's okay.
But all I'd say is that the proof of concept that the Irish Court Service are working on in relation to actual hearings and the applying AI to that will help judges, particularly in busy district court judges, even my court as well, that you can actually go back and find something very quickly.
And something that you can do today is they can upload a complicated legal document right now into any number of chat programs that you want, and it will translate your document into not just different languages so that you can understand it, but also into non-legalese language, and allow people to access through being able to navigate the legal system that can be very complicated. That's a today thing that can happen right now, and it means that people will be able to navigate much more freely than they otherwise could.
Mike, James, Tony, Catherine, thank you so much for the discussion.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you.